But okay, we're being recorded, so it's for real now. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to an experimental event tonight that's being brought to you with the work of the Alaska Developers Alliance. And also King Street Collab has been hosting us. I think we'll get a word in from them in just a minute here. And also thank you to all the volunteers that have been working on Alaska Startup Week. Too many to name, and we have the after party after we go into that, but just want to show the gratitude for being able to get all this together. So the idea of this actually came out tonight. Oh, I realize my Zoom session's still on here. One second. Here on the YouTube playback, 10 seconds. Okay. What first and only tech thing tonight, maybe. Okay. So the idea of this panel has been something a few of us have chased around in community conversations I've had with Jeff Levin and Eric Toldi about what does it mean for entrepreneurs to engage software developers? And a lot of us have been feeling like those kinds of connections aren't clearly defined, and oftentimes either the entrepreneur or the developers end up walking away, not totally understanding what happened. So tonight we have a panel that's spread out from Anchorage to Fairbanks, and we're going to be talking about that question. So I'm not going to frame it too much. I'm going to let all these panelists who know far more about it than I do talk about it. So coming this direction, we have Dave Beckberger. Dave has been working with companies in Silicon Valley and all over the world. Startups should say like small, medium enterprises?
Small all the way up to where I want to go.
Okay, and panelists, please lean into your mics so we can get you on the feed.
Yeah, pretty much everything from two-person shops all the way up to
Great. To his right, we have Jason Bernal, who has been building apps on the iPhone basically since the iPhone came out, right? He works for Blackbox VR. They are an online and VR mobile gaming company. I'll let him kind of tell you more about it.
Yeah, Virtual Reality Fitness. They have gyms in San Francisco, and what is it? I don't know if you go in and do a workout with actual physical equipment inside of a video game with reality simulation. Which is neat.
Excellent. That's going to really be great to talk about for mobile. To his right, we have Nigel Sharp, who is Anchorage's entrepreneur in residence. And the director of Center for, I'm going to get all these wrong, right? Nigel, you should just do this. You can name everything off better than I can.
Cool. I'm not gonna whip it actually. I'm just gonna say recovering serial tech entrepreneur. No, actually no. Still active serial tech entrepreneur. Had 2 tech startups, Techstars alumni.
Thanks for that reminder. Actually, Nigel and I were teasing each other a little bit. Normally, I'm on the panel, and Nigel's so good at moderating these things. So now he gets to be the software developer tonight, and I can ask some questions.
So can I add a comment though?
Yes.
So I'm drinking beer.
Nigel, this is being recorded.
Yes, I know. It may not be allowed in your country. We're okay with it. So.
Alaska culture, okay.
Thanks.
To Nigel's right, we have Keith McCormick, who he and I have worked together before, and so I want to make sure I don't over-introduce since I know Keith so well, but right now his main projects are centered around Health Pie, which is really an exploration into how health tech can actually be used here in Alaska and begin to serve people a lot better than the tech we use it today. Can you say a few words about that, Keith?
Yeah, Health Tie, innovation hub for health tech companies, and a piloting program looking to connect young, budding health tech companies or companies that have technology that can be used in health and connect them to companies who are looking for solutions.
Okay. And to your right, at least from our perspective, you guys can't see the screen there, but we have Eric Toldi, who also works for Center Ice up in Fairbanks. And sorry, for folks online, we're talking to the BP Energy Center up in Fairbanks. Eric, what hat are you wearing tonight? How do you want to introduce yourself, sir?
Co-founder of Attently. Loud
okay.
Here.
Should we just, do you guys want a sound check? Okay, we'll go with that. So Eric, to your right, we've got Vincent Castro, who was also at Attently. Vincent, do you want to tell us about what you're working on and where you come from?
That's also, yeah, also the co-founder of Tently, and also I'm doing some freelancing stuff around here in the medical field and working as a senior software engineer at the hospital locally.
Okay, excellent. So thank you all. Thanks for being here. And I'm just going to kind of jump right in with this conversation. So I think that a lot of folks, and myself included once upon a time, had this idea that you can think about an application that you know works well for software, and you just sort of have to find somebody to go out and build it. And oftentimes that's a big black box. So would anyone like to take on their experiences being perhaps on that side of it, what you tend to look for when you're coming out to find a software developer for that project? Maybe that's not the right angle to come at it, but either from that perspective, or if anybody wants to talk about being on the other side of that and pairing up expectations or scope of the projects.
I guess I can tackle it. I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective on the panel here in that I don't have a computer science background. I was a Marine Corps infantryman, just IR grunt. I was in Afghanistan and thought of an idea, and it grew from there. And I had to go out and find people who had these skills, people like guys on the panel here, and search for that. And I started searching in Alaska and wasn't, finding what I was looking for, who I needed, or a core group. And I probably wasn't looking in all the right channels because I was so outside of the scope. But I ended up outsourcing my first iteration, my prototype, and it was definitely a long, hard process and a big learning experience for myself of trying to figure out the lingo and the methods and how things worked in this world. So until I finally kind of learned enough and got enough experience and found the right group here in Alaska and connected with people and found kind of the proper people to bring in to help me bring the idea to fruition.
And Keith, can you just elaborate a little bit on the early part of that process? I mean, the part between the idea and when you were writing your first line of code.
Yeah, so I didn't write any code at all. I actually opened up Microsoft Paint and drew it out because that's about as sophisticated as I get on that side, especially early on. So I just remember searching around the world and kind of trying to find quotes, and I drew it up the best I knew how and was submitting it to companies in the US, and I was getting bids for 700,000, 1.3 million, and I was nowhere near that. I'm just the one guy with an idea. Then I started looking overseas and found in India getting quotes of like 10,000, Croatia bids of 70,000, much more manageable. So that was kind of the intriguing thing when you're on the outside of the sphere and you don't really know, and you just see these random prices from 10,000 to 1.3 million, and you just kind of are shooting in between of what you think your budget might be.
Right. I'm curious to hear about our co-founders of Attently in Fairbanks. Can you go into a little bit of that story?
So, for years I've been working as on freelancing and programming, and then they first started coming up with startup weekends in Fairbanks. I decided to come to one, and that's where I met Eric Soley, and his initial idea was about like having a sign in the back of your car so that people can read it or whatever, but we kind of pivoted to using facial recognition to see if people are paying attention when you're giving speeches or when you're trying to sell a product, I guess. And getting that started, after we won that startup weekend, we went on to AIC, and we had to refine our product because I had the first prototype I wrote out really quickly. I did it in probably like 6 hours on my laptop with like a Python and OpenCV and a web camera, just trying to capture faces properly, and also using some tools to kind of detect emotion too from other publicly known databases. But after we got that going with the AIC, we won that, and we used that money to start funding things and get the paperwork in and get the registration in for the business license, but a lot of our stuff wasn't stuff we were trying to sell right then. We were doing a lot of fundraising, looking for investors. We were worried about runway and how long we're going to last. Well, we have to go look for these investors. Who's going to invest in our product? A lot of that happening. More than our product's going to sell and fund our business, we were looking for people that are interested in our business to make it expand.
Why is that important for you? Why is it that they're interested in the business, not just that they're the most competent people?
What's that?
Sorry, it sounded like you were saying that you were looking for people who were very interested in the business.
Oh no, I was saying it was more about how the business was funded, as in we were talking about how you have a product to sell. We have a product to sell, and we have a service to sell, but a lot of the early startup was about getting funding from investors and having people who would want to, spend some money to invest in this with some equity coming back to them, or something of that effect.
And did Atently effectively need that in order to get started, or that was the plan to get you to a minimum viable product?
It was definitely needed. It was definitely needed because a lot of it in the early days was just me and Eric paying things out of our pockets, buying certain things, using the credits we got after winning Startup Weekend to start our own AWS servers. So using credits from that still, and also getting into with Eric Talby when we got into Launch Alaska. That helped us more build our business more, build out servers more and services we needed.
I see Nigel nodding there. Nigel, do you have any experiences resonating with that? Or that kind of experience?
Starting lean.
That was just beer at work.
Sure, brother. Yeah, a bunch of stories. I had two tech startups, two tech software companies, I guess. And interestingly, one grew in a community that isn't much bigger than Alaska, so kind of like a similar kind of story and similar veins, some takeaways there. But we started off by just having some smart folks. And I remember the only investment we had was a little bit of money. We bought some laptops because we didn't have computers to work on, and found some desks. Reset up my living room. My wife's sitting in the audience, and she remembers very well. So coming home one day, and that we dragged these desks in, changed out the living room, and turned it into kind of an office space. So I remember that was it. That and some Wi-Fi, and that's kind of like in the originations of any software company. The company was working on human-computer interaction technologies, so using gesture and voice control specifically. And the big thing that we got excited about was this Microsoft Connect technology that was out there. So I remember that was like our big, one of our big purchases was like spend a couple $100 and buy one of these Connect things, and none of us really being strong software development folks, but all of us looking at it going like, it's just a .NET library, we should be able to put some things together and make something tick. There's all these examples, right? You download it, you press play, and it kind of works, and it's like, oh, that's neat. So I think you sort of you ramp that forward, and you don't actually need a huge amount of technology to get going. And the second company, we leveraged a university, so we were in Colorado. We leveraged the university, so we leveraged the lab, we leveraged the stuff that already existed, and we didn't buy any tech for a while. I think other than a few monitors, we didn't buy an awful lot of stuff up front, and we totally leveraged credits and whatever. It's almost there's so many startup programs to support you. You can get, we used, we didn't go to AWS for a particular reason in Colorado. We decided to use the IBM systems, and they had some really great credits out for startups. They still do. And, just having to talk to those guys and spinning up a bunch of stuff on their servers, there's just really no need for you to have very much stuff.
Right. Dave, could you pick up on that a little bit? Because you work with quite a few companies. How many overall would you say?
Probably about, in a variety of different capacities, probably about 7 to 10 different startups over the years. And I think I come at it from kind of a different side because I'm usually the one that's being approached to help them build, to help entrepreneurs trying to start a company, build something. None of them have been super successful as of yet, but hopefully someone that I'm working with will make it. But I think what I always kind of see is the big thing that I've always seen kind of coming to the other side is trying to make sure, kind of to the earlier point about budget, is make sure the expectations of what you're trying to build and what you actually can accomplish in the budget that you have. Because lots of times people come in, they have these really great ideas, they're really excited about it, but the reality of how much work it's going to build what they want versus the budget that they have. Because most startups and every early startup is always budget constrained, pretty much, you know. At least anyone I've ever heard of is budget constrained. So I think what I've spent a lot of time doing is kind of working with, if those sorts of opportunities come up, is trying to work with them to kind of say, okay, so this is what you want, this is what your budget is, how can we kind of work to tear down what you want to really the key features that you really need to get out there with. Get out there fast, get it out there, let's get it out there fast, and then we can kind of start iterating once you start getting some sort of momentum going behind your product.
Also to add from the kind of developer standpoint, program standpoint, my thing that kind of jumped out to me is first in terms of like prices that you get. So obviously you go to the development shop and bid for what we're trying to build. I think one of the biggest things is making sure they have expertise in what they're trying to build. Because most development shops will bid kind of a fixed estimate based on how much time it'll take them longer. They don't actually have much experience in it. So that kind of, especially as you get into more advanced stuff like mobile, it's pretty well established now. We get into virtual reality, augmented reality, those sort of things. They're more cutting edge, so you want somebody's experience with that. But even on mobile, you'd want, if you're doing something with a lot of server-side architecture, you want to make sure they have experience in that, etc. Also on the offshore outsourcing, I've worked with a couple companies that have done that and kind of tried to do it myself. And it can work out really well to save some money. The biggest thing though is you have to be really specific about what you want built, like to a very, very particular degree. So if you are kind of going to use a company like that, you really want to think about, if you're building an app, you want to think about every single screen, every single interaction, every single interconnection between them all, how they all kind of how they work. If you can do that, you can save some money. But it's with the communication issues there, you have to be really specific on the product. But if you're trying to just do like a general idea, like I just want this concept built, then it's often kind of easier to do that. So it's not in India or whatever.
Some pretty uber Microsoft things skills there.
I think we've heard from everybody except Eric. I don't know. We can always pass and we can jump into other questions, but I wanted to make sure you got your voice in too.
Well, so I can add a little bit. I joined Atently after we had raised a little bit of money, and we then did everything Jason said you should not do. We started developing our product, hired a bunch of people that I knew from UAF here who were did not have expertise in the things we were building. And at the same time, we started doing a bunch of customer discovery and pivoting our product every other week to a different market. So a lot of whiplash to new developers, a lot of learning that they were doing, a lot of switching the products and services that we were using to build the product. It was a good time.
Sounds like it. I'm wondering if anybody has any experiences to kind of share up here for especially the very early part of your product. I mean, you just kind of were beginning to go beyond your wireframing and whiteboarding discussions to actually build stuff. Was there a moment where you go, I wish I knew this 2 months ago, right before we started?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I guess, this has come from quite a bit of experience in doing this stuff. So first company, our obsession was, tech is the exciting part. So you get in, you're like, oh, we've got a Microsoft Connect camera, cool, let's start seeing what we can make it do. And then we're going to add some software, and add a little feature on here and add something else on there, and then seeing it run, and constantly trying to process some more code, add some more things in, actually create things that execute and run to do something new, cool, and fantastical. I can say we didn't always know why, right? Like we didn't really question why we were doing that. Like if we had a vision of like, oh, we want to build, like if we do this thing and demo this stuff, that'd be cool. And that was a big, big driving element of what we had. I can say as I've grown up through doing software and having sort of learned a bit through startups, I think in the second company, it was like, oh, we think we know we can, as soon as we knew we could do something, we stopped doing it. So the moment we knew we could do something is when we stopped. The second piece of that is that, so we only had to know it could be done, right? And once we knew it could be done, then we would stop having to try to do it. And the second thing was like, what did we have to do was the minimum thing we had to do to be able to learn something about, what the customer or the other person wanted. And that was a complete twist on the head, and it was really, really hard because in the second company, we have grown now, but I mean, initially, it was just a few of us, and there was a very big temptation of like, hey, let's spin up some tech, let's do some stuff. And in that company, there was a big desire for us to go down the same path as the first time, but with the lesson learned of like, hey, let's not do that. We actually spent months and months and months not building anything, not doing anything, even though we have the tech skills to go and do things. We kind of like validated like, oh, these things to be done. This is what the architecture would like, and actually drawing out the architecture and how it would look was all we needed to go out and sort of move the project forward. The most important thing was understanding what the customers and how the customers would be corrected.
It's very interesting. You said the moment we knew we could do something, we stopped.
I'd say the one thing I would add to that from some of my experiences is also making sure you making sure that at the very beginning you spend the time to kind of prioritize the things that get you kind of first money. Because just because this feature may be the neatest, maybe the coolest, maybe the best demoable thing, it's going to take twice as long to build, and it's still going to mean that you're not going to be able to bring in revenue or bring in customers. That's great, but you know, in my experience, it's better to kind of focus on, hey, how am I actually going to make this business sustainable, and then I can worry about it growing it.
I mean, that's what the provision depends on what you're doing, right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And this is the hard part of having Bradley, is maybe that happens in the context of the conversation that we're talking about building out just like apps and doing stuff with outsourcing web issues, or we're actually building technology. There's two different realms there.
I mean, that's interesting. So that is part of the conversation: is are they two different realms, and how? I think again, you know, I'm leaving this probably dangerously unstructured because I want to see what people's framework and thinking is about this in the community. I know a lot of folks on the business side come at it purely from a revenue standpoint. How can we get to dollars fastest? Which is a totally valid perspective. I also think talking to software developers, they have a lot of thoughts about how that should kind of unfold.
Now, to give a framing context, I think that we talk about tech startups a lot, and you know, we talk about software tech startups a lot, and what we don't realize is the vast majority of them aren't building technology. They're utilizing ready-made modules of technology that fit in together in a new, fancy way. Generally, what they're really trying to do is optimize user experience around that particular use case technology. There's other startups that are out there that are actually like, you know, redefining technology, right? So in my first company, developing deep neural networks, our own deep neural networks, like sitting down, actually like, you know, addressing our own like voice algorithmic patterns and like developing our own algorithms and like, you know, really trying to sort of like lead a small edge on that. And that moves into that like, you know, research kind of like, you know, basic applied research realm of technology, and then leveraging that. Same with the second company, right? Like we were a tech company, and when we were in Techstars, I mean, a lot of people don't recognize this, but they go to Techstars and go, oh, Techstars is a business accelerator program for tech startups. But, you know, in that program, there's 12 companies, and the other 11 weren't building tech. And, you know, that is the norm, right? That's actually what they mainly invest in. We were by far the black sheep. It was very unusual for them to actually invest in a company developing tech. In the second company, because we were dealing with network infrastructure technologies and reimagining how protocols could sort of interface and doing things at a very fundamental level is different. So I do think there's a difference in what we're talking about here. I just think that maybe we should, I think the vast majority of the stuff falls in the category of the classic tech startup, which is, you know, actually reusing tech in a new, innovative way to serve the customer's problem.
Which is interesting that that's kind of the notion of the classic tech startup. I'd love to get Jaison's thoughts on how, for example, the iOS ecosystem changed from, what, 2007 to 2019, where you're still in it? In 2007.
Before he starts with that,
yeah.
The mics you guys have are very directional. So if you're not speaking into them, we like you drop by half in volume and we can barely hear you. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you, Eric. We'll do our best in that. Yeah, so maybe you can kind of bring to us that notion. Certainly today we see a lot of very inexpensive places to get an app made. You go on Upwork and pay sometimes $10 or less an hour to have somebody make you a fairly simple list-based app on a phone. And certainly that's been very different over time. So what do you make of that writing software that's new technology, maybe like when you started out on iOS, and where it's at today?
Yeah, so as the platform has matured and become just more ubiquitous for everybody, there's been more competition and more people entering, obviously, at lower prices. If you were bidding a project, this kind of what goes back to what I was saying earlier when we want to look at the expertise of whoever you're potentially considering hiring to knock out a project. You might find somebody, bid a bunch of projects, and somebody will say, they'll work like $50 an hour, and somebody else wants like $110 an hour or something. And maybe 10 people are like, oh, well, that's great, like, obviously the person is half the price. But oftentimes, if you look at the portfolio, the person is a higher price and they've actually done what you're talking about doing, and have like quite a bit of apps behind it. Then what actually ends up happening is they can reuse previous code, and they know how to they've encountered all these issues, and they kind of get ahead of it. Like innovators programming here is on Stack Overflow all the time just because we run into some issues like it's so specific. You know, how to do some research on it. Somebody's already done a type of project and do that. You know, they've already dealt with that obscure compiler error or whatever. So as things have over the course of the life of the iPhone, as an industry, the prices have been driven down, which is, you know, competition is good, so that's not a problem. I've focused always on niche kind of environments. Like I really enjoy doing kind of the fringe stuff, which is why I'm doing the mobile app for virtual reality fitness company, and so there's less competition in that space. It's pretty unique. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
And I want this to be open. If any of you have a question for any of the other panelists, I'm wearing this moderator hat very late tonight. And also, if there are questions out in the audience, perhaps here in Anchorage or in Fairbanks, happy to bring a mic around and bring questions. I'm seeing a hand from Cut Holland, so.
Well, if you're ready for it, but I'm ready with questions.
Yeah, unless our panelists have anything else to add on that last question. Okay.
I'm Kai Holland, and the question I want to throw at you is that I think that there is a fundamental disconnect between the startups and the developers that starts off at the very beginning, where startups already have this preconceived notion of what it is they think they want versus what they need because of their own experience and what the technology that they've used does versus what could be done. And on the other hand, there's a similar disconnect of whoever you talk to as a developer. In essence, if they have a hammer, things start looking like a nail to them. If they have a screwdriver, it looks like a screw. And so you have startups that want something that they may not need only because of their experience of what they've used. You have developers that have experience with what they've worked on, that they're comfortable with, that they understand the flexibility of it doing. And so what I'm curious about is how have you found it to be more effective to interface at the beginning, to do some early discovery work, some customer validation, to do some exploration, so that you start getting on the same page in terms of startups starting to learn about the technology options they might not be aware of, and the developers start understanding that their skills and their tools may or may not be the right ones for where the startup is going. So I'm really interested in your understanding of that mixed set of expectations early on that starts creating this conundrum of the path forward and many times missed or misaligned expectations.
And I'll start. So I think it's kind of obvious knowledge now that you should iterate over a product, right? You create your first product and kind of get feedback on it. But one of the big things when looking for a development shop is kind of getting a sense and asking them how long it takes to create a basic prototype and kind of what tools they use. A lot of tools actually are a lot better for prototyping than other tools. So you kind of say, this really like concept, how long it takes to get something that's workable, something that can at least get people to use and kind of play around with and see what they're doing this for. Because absolutely, you might have this idea in your head of a product, somebody actually starts pressing on a phone, start tapping the button, and all of a sudden it just completely breaks. And just you realize, and you have a third-party perspective, actually, they don't have to learn with the technology of the product, their perspective on it is invaluable. You'll realize you had thousands of assumptions you couldn't even imagine once you go through that. So yeah, so basically make sure that you're able to iterate and prototype. It's pretty important.
Okay, I'm just checking. So what helped me out a lot is because I went to the startup weekend type of environment. They had books. They gave us something like Lean Startup and Mom Tests would helped us find out what type of product a person was looking for. And that really helped me with the disconnect as a developer because I find I have a hammer. I want to solve every problem that comes across me, but really you have to find out what actually solution are you solving. Are you actually solving anything, or are you just dust in the wind and not doing anything really? And having that sort of structure where you had people that went through that and they wrote these books and they have these knowledge out there really helps nowadays, because I would think a few years ago you wouldn't have those sort of resources. You wouldn't have Startup Weekend. You would have to start from a lowest point and climb your way up.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about that, about a couple of the startups I've worked with where I've kind of run into this sort of thing. And in my experience, at least, it's kind of come in two different flavors. One where I was basically trying to be, they wanted me to hire, they hired me to just build an app or a web page, whatever would be done. And that I think kind of been covered, the ways to kind of help with that. But the other one is where they really kind of more wanted to partner with me, either bring me on as like a co-founder or basically a long-term partnership. And I think in that sort of scenario, there was a lot more time spent up front doing discovery and really discussing the business use cases and the reasons why, before the tech, why or why not you want to go one way or the other about that, versus more like, if you're building a web page, it was kind of, okay, this is a little more, this is the tech stack that I know well, this is where I can give you the best value for your money, that kind of. It was the hammer that I knew, so it's the one I can give you. Yeah, I can give you the biggest bang for the buck right now. But in those scenarios where they were looking for a longer term sort of, partnership back and forth. It was, I think that was when we really started diving into what was the right choice, because that's an investment from the developer side to really understand the problem, and an investment from the business side to really kind of help build that relationship and pass along the knowledge, your knowledge of the problem to the developer and for them to be able to recommend the best option.
I was going to basically agree with that. Integrating the business side with the development side as early as possible. And that's kind of one of the problems and friction points when you use an outsourcing firm, is that there's a definite separation. And when there's that separation, I'm saying, hey, we need this. And then they're over there and they're using their hammer and they're nailing it out. And then it comes back and I'm like, no, it's not, you're not intending it. It's not done in the way it was intended. And we're sending it back and forth. And it's just the lack of their in-depth understanding of the business model or the business or how it's supposed to work. They're getting a very small picture, and they're doing it to the best of their ability because they only see what they can see. So getting integrated early, and it can be done with an outsourcing firm. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just much harder. But if you have a team, especially local, I've worked video conference with people in the U.S. and it can work. It's just harder, but the closer I think you can be with your development team as early as possible, doing the continual discovery, continual customer validation, and the research and integrating the development side as early and frequent as possible. The solution that I found.
I have one more thing to add to that. So the business side is pretty critical. And there's some elements that you can kind of, some people find kind of miss a little bit. Like for instance, once built this really cool app as a key app, you can actually analyze the key and save it to your phone. You can see, add 20 keys in there, see which key it is, and all that. It was really neat. It's a cool app. But the question is, and everybody passed the mom test, everybody liked this, easy to use, all that stuff's good to go. The question is, how many people actually buy that at what you expect it to cost, which is like $5 at most, is an expensive app these days, right? Maybe 10. And the real reality is, I don't think anybody realized that there just isn't enough people who are interested to buy it at that level. So you have to partner with maybe a door manufacturer or a non-manufacturer or whatever to pull it off from a business standpoint. So it's tempting to I have this cool idea technology, I build it, it's awesome, it's amazing, but can you actually sell it to enough people for it to make sense to build it in the first place? And that's something you have to think through carefully. You can easily get excited about what you're building without realizing there's actually a problem business case.
Right. And I might add to that, this is Startup Week, and we bring this up through a lot of events and a lot of contexts. But I think that people often enter this entrepreneurship crazy thing, believing that the idea is the value. I see the bag of seed as the harvested grain silo of whatever. And I think that the process of engagement in this community shows you that generally the more open you can be with your ideas early on, better kind of testing you're getting of those concepts.
Yes, and on that point, be conscious about NDAs. And everybody
Tell us
here.
about NDAs.
Oh yeah, everybody in this panel, I'm sure, someone's like, I have an idea, sign this NDA, right? And I understand, especially in the Apple world, I've seen just hundreds of NDAs. And I understand the temptation of I have this really cool idea, I want to protect it, I don't want you to be able to tell anybody. The reality is though, only you are going to be excited enough about your idea and see the total scope of it to actually invest the time to build it. Because the chances of somebody stealing your idea is into testing small. And what ends up happening is you don't end up validating the idea, you don't actually bring it to people and provide it as a business use case. And you don't get as much feedback on it, right? So it's actually very harmful to kind of hide your ideas behind the your chest, because probably the chance somebody's stealing is 1 in a million, and just have feedback on ideas possible.
That's
So I just kind of want to disagree with Keith a little bit. We had a very internal development team early on at Atently, and yes, you want to bring them in early, but you want to wait until you understand the problem that you're solving, because otherwise you're having developers that want to build things and you want them to build things because they're expensive, they're not building. But one of the worst things you can do to someone is say, build this, and then 2 weeks later say, we're not using that anymore. We talked to some customers. Now we need you to build this. It's probably one of the most demoralizing things you can do to people. So yeah, wait till you know about what you want to build so that, you know, it's a small modification, not a re-engineering from the ground up.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there. And also integrating early, you definitely need to have your focus, because there can also be drift on the developer side as well. They have, I mean, can do amazing things, right? And they start taking it like, oh my gosh, yeah, we could do this and we could do this. And then you start getting drift and you're pushing out your MVP and you're not staying with the smallest thing, getting out there quick and testing it. So there is, yes, I agree with you, some limitations. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would add, so part of my background is also doing a lot of prototyping, and I think part of it is also, there's a difference between telling you to build this and this is what we're going to build versus if you're building something really quick and cheap that I can go show to somebody, fail fast. Because as a developer, if I know that this is probably going to change, I'm going to, first off, I'm going to take some shortcuts because it's going to make my life easier, it's going to get it out faster, and I'm also not going to kind of feel as invested in that product because I know it's going to change. But, a lot of times you need something to actually go play with, to show to somebody and actually let them touch it. Because a picture does one thing, but actually be able to touch it.
Since we were talking about ideas earlier and refining them down to what the core value is, I'd be interested in hearing from all of you about whether or not really, assuming this isn't your own project and your own idea and you're joining something, how important is it to you to completely get the mission and goal and idea of whatever that thing is, that technology that you're creating, in order to join, or when would it be just about money?
I mean, ideally.
Whoever wants to take that one.
I can take that one. I'd say for me, I think it depends on what sort of agreement am I looking to have with this company. Am I looking to have an agreement where it's just, you do this work, we're done, and then they're going to go off and do their thing, and I'm going to go off and do my thing? Are they looking for a longer-term engagement? If you're looking for like a longer-term engagement, either just either a partnership, bringing somebody on, or just a longer-term kind of, there's going to be a consistent stream of work coming through. If it's going to be a longer-term thing, I'm much more apt to invest my time and effort in really understanding their vision than something that's like, here's 2 weeks.
And just to refine my question, I might say, you ever hear about a project and say no before you hear how much they're going to pay you?
Yeah, so I do something to change my rate based on the nature of the project. I once was asked to bid, so I work in a video game engine called Unity for a lot of the apps I do. And I was once asked to bid a project for a casino kind of gambling ship. Turns out Unity actually is very popular. This game is very popular in the gambling ship. But I had a hard time deciding, like, how do I feel about working on the gambling ship compared to the other projects I could work on? And so I kind of gave him a skyrocketed rate just because if I was going to do it, I didn't want to do it for long. And yeah. So anyways, the more practical point there is, if you are talking to a developer to actually some value and saying, hey, this is a project, has this kind of good that it can do, it may actually change the rate.
Did they pay you the rate?
They did. Yes. I didn't take the project. I did not take the project. They did say they'll pay me that. I was like, I just can't do that. I was fortunate to be able to say no. Like, I had other projects that would work. I couldn't work on the gambling chain to do that.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes down to the kinds of work that we set ourselves up for, because there's certainly that question of sorts of work you don't want to do. And I personally believe that as developers, it's on us to take those stands, whatever they are. I think we just need to actually figure those things out, talk about it. The other question, the other part of that question, though, is time commitment. And it seems like a lot of these projects, if it is something relatively novel, something that you're not copying, you can expect the timeline to be years. If you're really joining this because you want it to be yours, what sort of considerations go into that? What do you want to hear as a developer from a founder that says, hi, I think you're great. I'd like you to join me on this for the next 3 years of your life. Do you have questions about that? And how do you approach the project?
The tricky one about that, though, is sometimes you just don't know ahead of time. A lot of the projects I've been involved in start off as like a 1 month, 2 month project, and we're working together, so it kind of expand from there. Even my current client, Blackbox VR, things like that, we started with just doing the mobile app as a 2 month long project to do a certain kind of MVP, minimal viable project of what they're looking for, and now it's been a year and a half later, and we're still kind of adding all sorts of crazy features. So yeah, so sometimes it's hard to know ahead of time, but if you do know ahead of time, yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a work-life balance thing, right? Like, are they the type of company that's going to make you, or want you to work, on weekends and till 9 p.m. and lots of crazy deadlines, those sort of things are nice to know ahead of time. It's hard to ask that directly, but you get a sense of that pretty early on. And yeah, it's nice to know if the company is doing something kind of cool, and unique, and interesting, and beneficial somehow. And obviously, if you're a developer, it's nice to have a share of the company if you can. Not always applicable here, especially if you're a contractor, but we turn down shares.
I mean, I would also say, at least from my side, I can think of a couple instances where I can think of one specific instance where I ended up walking away from a company that I kind of helped start, and specifically because the other founder that was there, had this vision and was not flexible at all to anyone else's input on that. And, as you're going through, you're building this out, and very frequently you have this, we could also do this, we could also do this. There's other ways to do it other than ways that one person thinks that it should be done. And they weren't open to being able to have those discussions. It was kind of their way of hiring. So definitely was a learning lesson for me. To make sure that it's people that are, if I'm going to join a long-term commitment on a company, it's people that value my input as much as they value.
Yeah, I think it's you have to give them some sort of power in the choices you're making, which makes them more part of the project. So they're not just taking orders all the time; they're actually working with you and not for you. And also with time commitments, it's just it's kind of something you have to work on initially, I guess. So when we have hired our first employees, we had to tell them that they're not going to get paid very well. You're not gonna have like a really good lunches and all that other stuff. We're just a startup that doesn't have much yet, so they know at the point they're starting. But if you get them in where they have a say in the process and they're excited about the project, they want to work there, even though they're not paid well. They're in a dream like you are, just waiting to get to that one point where everybody can live comfortably.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For all the mistakes that we made very early on at Tentley, we did keep the developers for a very long time because we had them working on interesting things. They were part of like creating the vision for the company. They were very involved in everything we were doing. So they felt like they were part of the process. And we explained like we were learning things too. So they gave us a lot of latitude in that regard.
One area I want to touch on and get all of your thoughts is the differing notions of developer skill. There's lots of things if you're looking for a developer to build you a project that you're going to see when you come out there. Full stack developer, or Rails developer, or web app developer. And I think that it can be difficult for entrepreneurs that are not familiar with the coding scene, never been on Stack Overflow, to sort of make sense of what all of that means. So I guess, what is the process of engagement for each of you if you're talking with someone about their project to kind of give them a framework for what level of developer they need. I know I've had to talk many clients down that think they need a full mobile app, and actually explain to them that perhaps they can't even get that app published on the App Store or on the Play Store because the functionality is not novel enough to meet terms of service. And it seems to be that that's a conversation we're having again and again, so we need to begin to steer folks toward our ecosystem of coders and wanting to support that in a way that they're engaging the right developer, for the right part of that process. So, any kind of general thoughts on that, or what Anchorage and Fairbanks, could be doing to help foster levels, of developers at all of those levels?
Well, so
Go ahead.
from the Attendly side, like one of our missions kind of early on was to create some actual good programming jobs in Fairbanks. So, despite the mistakes that we were making with like having developers working on these things very early on, switching things on them all the time, it did fall in line with like actually having a software development job and not just an IT job available for people here in the city. That also allowed us to pay them very, very low. So it was not an expensive lesson that we had to learn. It was a cheap lesson we had to learn. And I kind of forgot where I was taking this answer because I forgot the question. But I hope that answered part of it.
Probably the quality of my question has something to do with that. I wasn't trying to ramble about it, but I was reflecting back to when I was finishing code school in Portland, how there had been 2 code schools that had closed just recently, and at one point the Rails development program there had put, I believe, over 150 entry-level Rails developers onto the Portland market, which was just too much weight for it to sustain. And then when not all of them could find jobs, there was a bit of a panic about that. So I think, this is ecosystem. This is just like a natural system, making sure that we're really fostering the right parts at the right time. So I don't know, but that is normally Nigel and Eric's bag, but I know they're here with us as developers tonight. But any thoughts you all have on that?
I think it's interesting that I would challenge those who have built businesses understand that the realm, like what you're talking about, is a very nice situation. I would love to be in situations like, I can pick. I can go to a mentor, ask them what type of developer I need. They go, you need this type of developer. They sort of like scoot back from that and go like, okay, this is the job posting out there. It's not my experience of startup land. Startup land, I find there isn't that big a pool of talent, and you don't get that level of choice because again, you don't provide the cool lunches. So you're having to scrape by, and sadly the world doesn't quite lay out as you wish. So one option is you do you find the outsourcing companies, sort of like what Keith did, to fill in those big holes, big gaps, and you pay for it with cash, which not all startups have enough cash to pay and outsource that. And I have like mixed opinions on whether or not that's even a good idea for other companies. And then, but if you either say trying to build technology, you've got to do it yourself, and you kind of like the Attendly situation where you want to create that. Oftentimes you're kind of stuck where you can't afford to pay the top barrel developers anyway, so you are going to end up having to sort of train people through the stage. And the sad part is that when we look at it, once upon a time, large companies actually used to provide internships, create developers, develop communities. They now understand that actually they can leave that, and they can leave all the students coming out of universities and kind of abandon and say like 2 years worth of experience, and the students are desperately trying to find where they're going to go, and graduates where they're going to go. They end up finding these jobs in these startups, which to Vince's words, don't pay that often or that well, right? And they go out, they get a little bit of experience, they grind through it, and unfortunately, all of that is being fronted by, sometimes venture capital, sometimes people's friends and family cash. So as a community, we're actually having to build people up to get that level of experience. Startups don't have the luxury of choice, so therefore, I'm kind of the question throws me off because we never had the luxury of choice. We ended up having to always, either leverage people that we knew, that we could sort of rope in as, basically friends and family investment of talent, right? Like, we could get us somebody to come help us out and do something. Or it was a bit further down the line where it was like, okay, we actually want to work with universities and programs to help bring some people in the junior levels, invest 6 to 9 months before they actually produce anything useful. I mean, they'd be cool to have around the office to share some ideas, but generally they weren't churning out any real serious amounts of code. And then we'll sort of grow them from there. So I know I wish I had the luxury of choice. Whenever we've had, and that's where I've aligned things. Like one of the reasons that startups may want to go out and seek money sooner than later. It's a big, conversation. This is a question maybe, but conversation of bootstrapping versus going out and getting venture funding for some of your ideas. Sorry, I'm mindful the mic is directional.
Let me ask a question about that. That's thank you for that data point. That's deeply fascinating to me. And I wonder if that depends on the community we're talking about. Like, I wonder is the story the same in Silicon Valley? Do startups have the luxury of choice there, where millions of people from all over the world are flocking for the chance to make it big? Certainly Anchorage is going to be a different kind of environment.
So I'll let someone else take like the tech hub area. I can talk about your options here in like Fairbanks, Alaska, which are not great. But the like good things that can come out of that is, one of the seeds that turned into the Dev Alliance came from us at Atently starting the Fairbanks Dev Alliance, because we were like, there is a pool of people here. They're just all dispersed and not connected. So I don't know, not having a great pool and having to sort of be scrappy and figure out how to build that pool up, it can turn into things like this.
So actually, I have a question, kind of a follow-up on that. I mean, what is your guys' feelings on hiring remote talent that expanding the pool drastically?
Remote talent's expensive. That was kind of our assumption.
And for me, it's kind of impersonal, because we have enough talent here, and the computer science people can, and also anybody who works in town as developers can use the experience here more, because you don't have a lot to pick from.
No, that's interesting. I'm just wondering, because I work for a highly distributed company now, and I've worked distributed several other times, so I was kind of interested in the other side of that equation.
I've sort of had a couple of companies, and again, both times we've outgrown the local market, so I've seen it happen twice. And we actually had to expand and have operations in multiple countries. So we either have talent offices. They were our own offices and our own employees. We didn't outsource stuff. Yeah, we don't really believe in it. Not for the core of your product, right? For other stuff like getting a website done all day long. And everyone wants to go to a website, right? But other people can do that stuff. And then, but the other side of it is when we were in Boulder, Colorado, for example, we were raising our first $2 million, totally fine, find the talent locally. When we raised $20 million though, whole different story. Now suddenly we're like a top growing startup, and very quickly now looking like, okay, we've outgrown the talent. And you can ask anyone, Boulder is a good example, 100,000 people. I can tell you straight off the bat, with Google and the employees they have there, and a few other big players in town, there's only a few that can actually have large scale offices. Can't even get office space beyond 6 to 8 people. It gets really, really tough in the town. So practically speaking, it's scaling issues. And when you're in a smaller environment, I think a lot of the times as we're talking about very small early stage companies, maybe not that many companies in Alaska have scaled internally, and to a certain scale that makes sense. But when you do, you'll quickly realize that the talent pool, is shallow, and you either import people in, or you absolutely have no choice with distribute out. You see that with every large tech firm out there. They haven't got a choice.
Atently has moved to Seattle, so just to support what you're saying right there.
I mean, it's always interesting to me as well, the lenses that we look at this stuff. I had a Portland company reach out to me a couple of weeks ago that wanted me to come in to interview, and I had to explain to them, sorry, I didn't update my GitHub profile yet. I'm not in Portland anymore. I'm in Anchorage. And after I got off the call chatting with them, it occurred to me, if I worked with them remotely, they'd be outsourcing. And I'm helping Portland to outsource its jobs to Alaska. But I think, from the standpoint of all of us, writing code is writing code, and working is working, and those are different lenses and ways to engage. So I wonder if the tools are the same, if we're trying to build a community here in Alaska of competent coders, people that, can go to their cabin with a Starlink or a OneWeb, connection and just be out and hunt and fish and code. And maybe those that want to be, plugged into an ecosystem here where companies are being created. Are are those two different kinds of coder, or are they all sort of supported by the same best practices, the same ways of engaging the market?
I mean, I can talk a little bit of that because I just moved here for that exact reason of wanting to be able to go hiking, fish, and all of those things. Because I mean, I came from a big tech market. I came from Houston when I moved out here like 6 months ago. But I worked for a distributed company even inside of Houston. So I don't, are they exactly the same? No. But I do have to say that, at least from my perspective, being able to come out here and find that there was a tech alliance was a really, really comforting thing to know that there, if for some reason, my job goes away, that there is this effort to try and build a local community to actually help, people that are here locally, have employment opportunities.
And on the note of like, if you are having an idea in mind and trying to figure out the right technology for it, I think the AK Dev Alliance is a great place to start. Like, we have meetings every month or so, and I'm sure anybody they welcome can come in there and talk to a ton of developers and kind of figure out what technology is appropriate. Because we're all computer nerds, we love to talk about whatever technology we use. Like I'll talk your head off about Unity and graph theory and all sorts of stuff. So, because I mean, even I would have a hard time with some technologies differentiating between. I'm not a web developer, so differentiating between a Ruby developer and some other full stack system. Like I don't know, I do data development and Unity stuff, but you definitely find people there across the whole range of technologies. So,
I want to be conscious of the time and also see if there's anybody in Fairbanks that has wanted to get a question in. Anybody out there waiting to?
We have one. I just wanted to know, what was your experience like maybe uploading your first app to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, and which roadblocks maybe did you run into with the review process? And then maybe a second part of the question is, have you found it helpful to go to any of like the developer conferences in the lower 48? Yeah, thank you.
yeah. Oh man, I have so many more stories of uploading builds. The very first generation of the compiling tool, the Xcode, the very first version, terrible, and I had a lot of problems with it. I spent days trying to get through the original distribution certificates and provisioning profiles and just a whole bunch of boring stuff that is really tricky to get set up just right. So that was the pain. That was literally days of just trying to figure out why Apple builds their pseudo security mechanisms kind of the way they did. But like it was actually done in the live store. Like it was launched the App Store actually first launched in 2008. I had a couple apps on there. That's definitely back when it was 500 apps on the App Store at launch compared to the 1 million, 2 million, however many it is right now. So that was cool. Also, I've been to quite a few developer conferences. I've been to Apple's WWDC for 7 years in a row. It was like the first one where they launched the App Store the first time, and that was a cool experience because everybody was excited. Everybody didn't know what was going to happen when they actually launched it. That was prior to, or really, I think it's prior to the actual launch of the App Store. But yeah, going to those events is always amazing. I highly recommend it. I also go to the Unity Game Developer Conference too. It's exciting because everybody there is also a nerd. It's a bunch of programming nerds, and so you talk to a ton of people who are excited about the same thing. And absolutely, at all these events, Apple One, Unity One, all of them eventually, there's always people, like experts, actual people who built the stuff that you're working with. You can ask questions too. So if there's some obscure, crazy bug that's deep within the compiling tool chain, you just be like, why the heck is it doing this? And they'll be like, oh, well, we screwed this thing up, and you have to do this, and if you hold the keyboard just this way, it'll compile for you. And, so yeah, definitely recommend developer conference.
Actually, that did bring up another thought I had just around, entrepreneurs and dealing with devs and how to get your first app is to actually make, there needs to be planning in time for things that aren't just coding, like getting it actually uploaded to the App Store. That can take a long time to expect to do. Building infrastructure, making it actually deployable, all these things are things that need to also be done.
So much great code checking stuff out there now for the software side. I haven't even done this number was before. So done some registry. Oh yeah, so done some registry coding is a way that they use it as a quasi-security thing to figure out you're actually a real company, which in the US actually isn't such a big deal. It can be expedited and do whatever. But if you're a foreign country company, like you go from a country that's a little bit more risky, like we were in Bulgaria at the time on trying to post things. I can guarantee you, like I was back and forth on the phones, tons of Bradstreet employees trying to figure out like, what was the system, why was it so antiquated, right? And this is European, any sort of like US government, quasi-governmental system, right? Like, what is this? Why does it nothing work, right? And like, what do you mean I have to like format the sentence, like format the comma in exactly right part of the sentence, otherwise you can't press the button or bad things happen. It's just insane. But anyway, so I don't know. When you say uploading things to app stores, like first thing done.
This is when I shouldn't tell you that I work for Lens. They were a client.
I know, Keith, you had a quick cup on the App Store before I met you. Was that an easy process, painful?
Our process was easy getting on the Apple App Store. Maybe it took a week. Came back with some trivial edits and got it posted the next week. It really didn't take long. Android, I think, was the same thing. Submitted maybe a trivial kickback, and in the next week, really nothing. I would just advise not to go on the Clover App Store. 6 months and they don't review it and don't know when they'll get to it. So I guess know your ecosystem. Yeah, it's up.
Yeah, and Apple can definitely be picky. And kind of everybody has different experiences. For the Black Box VR mobile app, we've actually had it to where it was succeeding the application for the review process for about 2 months straight, and then all of a sudden they became really concerned about privacy issues. They kind of created a privacy policy. So it's silly stuff like we were asking like date of birth, you sign up for membership, but then they obviously decided that you couldn't ask that because of privacy concern. And then I think gender too was one of them, which in this fitness application kind of was relevant, but we're like optional. Tell us your gender if you want to. And then we've had one where it was deployable to iPad technically, and they didn't care for like a month, and all of a sudden they do care, right? So it's Apple can be finicky. It's it's humans actually reviewing these things, and they tend to miss stuff, and so sometimes it'll be fine, and then sometimes it'll be not fine. It can be tedious. So always have like a buffer. There's something. It's really dangerous to be like, I need this to be live by this date, and submit it like 2 days or 3 days before. It could work out. Sometimes like I've had stuff with get approved in 20 minutes. That stuff takes 6 weeks to get approved. It's just 6 weeks is extreme outlier. That was many years ago, but it's you never know.
Which app store did you say was the long one, Keith?
Clover.
Clover?
Yeah, system. EOS system. Yeah, it's a private system. But going into what you're saying about people,
also that type of
yeah, talking about people reviewing this, yeah, we with Clover, because we're such a long, drawn-out process, we drew them out and like labeled everything, gave them like a guide of like what this does, what this whole application is for, giving them context, because they would just look at something like, oh, I don't know what this means, and it's because they just have no context of what you're trying to do. So giving them the most information you can is going to help expedite that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of interesting that you get those experiences. Did you choose that ecosystem, or did the client? Oh, we'll continue. Okay. Like I said, it's an experiment. We have no idea what's going to happen. Can you take us to kind of how you got led there? Did the client get you there? Did you, and fair disclosure, I work with Keith on some of this stuff, and so I'm trying to get his take on how things kind of get away from you and what we do.
Yeah, it was a white label for a client. They were looking for the solution. We're happy to white label this, and put it into their utilizing our technologies, put their brand name on it, and it'd be the same exact application just for their brand. And then it grew from, we'll just white label the Apple app and the Android app. So, hey, we want to go on the Clover marketplace, the Clover POS. It's going to be an app on there. And we didn't really want to do that. We're like, no, this isn't really a good fit for us, but they were really pushing us down the road. And as a startup, we were lean, and they were waving a good paycheck. They were a much larger company, and we kind of ended up going down that road with them. And turned out, I think, as you would expect, you get a lot of roadblocks with Clover not being a widely used system, and now Clover We don't know what's going on their side. And it's been a long, long road.
And this is perhaps another point for entrepreneurs that are joining us on the webcast. We talk a lot about pivoting, but sometimes pivoting from a software standpoint, it's not quite as easy as just updating your website, having a meeting about a few things. There's more to it on the business side than that. But sometimes it can mean potentially months or years of entirely redesigning, and that means throwing away literally the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars of development that you have in there. So this is why it's so critical to really think all the way through whatever that business plan is for the product, and make sure that there's some movement you can do in that business plan if it doesn't flesh out the right way. Because it can be really hard to kind of repurpose something once you see where the market's leading.
Yeah, when I wrote the first program for Atently, we had that for a while, and I was hacking it together. But eventually, we had to get rid of it to make it more, production code. That's what really hurt. It's like, oh man, you had this thing it's like your baby or something. You had to be able to pivot and give up on that sort of thing and rebuild it or rebrand it. It's hard to do sometimes.
I want to check and see if we have any more questions here.
If I can, I wanted to follow up on that point, because I find this a deeply interesting point. What situations have you been in, and how can we improve the situation where something that you've worked on has been technically an amazing success? You solved a technical problem, created a technical solution. You look at it and went, wow, this was incredible what I accomplished. But then the business side of it, the entrepreneur looks at it and says, it doesn't work, we've got to pivot. And all of a sudden, the heart, the mind, everything that you put into that is just thrown away in a heartbeat. And I think to a certain degree, you probably get that if that happens. But how can we get better at mutually acknowledging the success, the win, the amazing work that was done, and yet we still have to pivot and move away from it? How has that been done well, or how has it been done particularly poorly?
Share a brief story, Guy. I mean, I guess, our first company, which was the Nigel Sharp voice board, we were building a presentation software system using hands and your voice to control presentation software, right? So say the words Eiffel Tower, and it would just appear up on the screen, you could move it around wherever you wanted. I know you guys thought of Microsoft Connect. We actually advanced a long, long way from that, all the way down to mobile phones and advanced wearable devices and all sorts of other cool things. We invented some really cool technology. We had higher levels of voice recognition than power, is the power engine behind, the voice engine behind like Siri and other things. So we achieved some incredible results within certain scale and data sets of voice recognition. Technical forefronts, where technical conferences had fully standing ovations from developers, right? We had Microsoft, Apple, other people coming to us, looking at us and saying how we were doing things differently. So been there, done that, and I can tell you that I wish I had the foresight to ask the same question you were. We didn't. We just got really enamored with the technology there. And don't worry, we learned the lesson. The lesson always gets taught to you. It's taught to you by your customers. You will, at one point or another, slam into that wall when they don't do something they don't want. And I think that, unfortunately, we probably need to go through that first phase. And I think a lot of first-time tech startups, have to go through a phase of just being humbled by the market. And the market will teach you one way or the other, through a lack of investment, which hasn't come with a lack of traction with customers, or vice versa. Maybe you haven't enough customers. But anyway, it is. I think the market itself has a very nice self-refining ability to teach you that lesson and have you do that. And then going further forward, though, even when you have that lesson, it's been fully ingrained into you the hardest way possible. It's still really easy to fall back into like, oh, this is cool. Maybe we could put it a little bit cooler. Everybody would just come over and get really enamored with this. The hard part is because we see that stuff every day, right? We see the occasional ideas which are just really cool, right? Like I always love the cooler on Kickstarter. It was just like, how do these guys raise that much money? For those guys. Yeah, right. Totally. And it's a great video with a cool thing. It's like, yeah, okay, we just take a cooler and we just like stick a radio on it, some other stuff, and Bluetooth and do whatever else we want to do with it. And ta-da! It's like, and then suddenly like, we got $30 million on Kickstarter or whatever it was initially, and we got even more online. Anyway, it's just incredible. Then we got like, oh, you see, have a really great, cool idea. That's what you need. So See, I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question, Kai, because it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, if I can, though, I want to get a couple others to respond to this. I'm okay with the fact you have to pivot. I want to know how we preserve the relationship between the entrepreneur and the developer. Because I don't think the entrepreneur properly understands and is willing to say to the developer, I really like what you did. You did a great job. Now we got to move away from it. I think it's just thrown away too quickly.
I mean, I totally agree with that. I think that when we see developers just paper to get to an end, which is part of the challenge I have. I think there's different kinds of outsourcing. If you're outsourcing, like, how to say it, like personality-lessly, where you don't really know who's on the other end of that, you have a logo and a promise of money sitting in escrow. Like, that's very different than when, you know, I'm having a 3-hour Skype call, you know, with video once a week with my team. It feels like they're employees that I could work with in the office. So.
I guess I can answer your question a little bit and just share some of my heartbreak and giving my baby away, as you were talking about in Fairbanks. You know, we built our app, we built our system in the order ahead industry. You know, it took years to build. We got a patent. We felt like we had an amazing product. It was very inexpensive for people to utilize. And then, you know, we're still struggling with traction, getting customers. And I think there's a little value proposition problem of if it's cheap, it's not worth very much. And then a young hot startup comes out of Silicon Valley doing the exact same thing. Prettier product, less technology involved with it, less features, and much more expensive. And they're taking off, and now they're highly funded. And talk about giving my baby away. Yeah, you know, we looked at it and we're like, okay, you know, we're struggling. What's the best option for us to, as a company, for our customers, you know, who we had been working with for years, because even before we started developing, we were doing the customer research and asking, I mean, Microsoft Paint, going to shops like, hey, do you think you'd use this, you know, something like this? And, you know, they grew with us for a long time. And then is handing off the product, basically that service, part of the company, selling off that asset to that company, and, you know, taking what win we can and learning our lessons. Definitely trying to keep relations with the developers utilized, because I learned a lot. The rest of the team learned a lot. The developers learned a lot. And you kind of want to retain that value and that working relationship, as you now worked with each other and know how to operate and function as a team. So that's a little bit of my story on how to take the win and keep the entrepreneurship and developer relationship going.
I think we sell the upside so often. I think we sell the upside to potential employees or co-founders at the early stage. And let's talk about the employees, right? The first employees, the developers coming to a company, outsourced or not, whatever the case. And they're working for the company at a very early stage. And we always sell the upside, right? Take some equity, become worth more, this kind of stuff. And when we talk about the upside, we don't talk about the downside. The downside of your issue by being really upfront and saying, by the way, like, either your skill set will be totally inappropriate as we build this thing out, we learn from customers we need to pivot, in which case, hey, don't expect this is going to turn into a job long term for you, right? We'll be brutally honest about that up front. Or even more realistically is like, hey, look, we really appreciate the quality into this, but most likely whatever it is we build from day one will be different later and later and later. It's a different skill set. They're working in a startup and not working in a company. They want to go work in a company, it's a whole different thing. I think a lot of developers don't understand the difference between companies and startups.
Actually, what I was going to say was basically what you said is you know, quite honestly, be honest about why. Be honest up front about the likelihood of it happening, and be honest when it happens as to why you're making it. We're changing to this because we had, you know, we're getting beat and we have to sell this house in order to take our win.
So we had this problem in a big way at Attentley. Lots and lots of tension at the company due to this. And really the way we got beyond it is we pulled the developers off machines and we put them in front of customers in customer discovery interviews. Because it's one thing for us to tell a developer that like, hey, the customer doesn't want this and we need to pivot. And it's another thing for them to see it because, you know, we're all smart people. We can all figure this out, but you know, if you're getting third-party information, it's not as good as first.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. The company I work for, I was actually just out this entire last week on a customer site, and I was actually out with the lead engineer of the product I work on. And that was exactly his experiences. You know, we've been telling him this doesn't work, and you know, the customers have problems here, here, and here, and then he walks out there and he actually watches it and witnesses it for himself, and it's kind of it's one thing to hear it, it's another thing to kind of see that.
Yeah, that's a great plan. The more the developers involved in aspects of the business, I think the more accepting they're going to be about kind of activity as necessary. Also, if you can reuse some of that code, reuse some of that technology, I think that helps from the developer's perspective. Some core base or some framework they've created that can be reused if that's applicable. That's nice. I think it is a really good point about trying to maintain the relationship with the developer, that to try and do something with the existing code base, right, if that's possible. That's I like the idea for sure.
So I want to make sure that we allow a few minutes before we got to give up the space for people to socialize in the room. So we don't have to wrap up right at this minute, but just want to kind of bring things in. And I realize I've asked a lot of questions from a lot of different places tonight, vaguely related to software development, but I wanted to start a conversation with this community, a public one, where we can talk about the challenges we face as developers, how we see things. Hopefully there are entrepreneurs out there that are interested in that, listening to that. And I also want to say, you know, if you are out there and you do have an idea or a project that you want to bring into the world and you need software talent for it, here in Alaska, the Alaska Developers Alliance is a group that's been formed to allow those developers to be found and engaged and talked to, and also for them to explain, again, in this format, of what they have to offer the project and how best to engage them. So I would really encourage you to look up the Alaska Developers Alliance and seek us out, talk to us about your projects, and what you're kind of looking for in this community. Does anyone else have thoughts to kind of begin to wind this up? Things you wanted to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what you were saying there, Bradley. The other part the Alaska Developers Alliance is doing is we're trying to build up the skills here in Alaska. So if there's, you know, some skill set that you feel like we need here in Alaska and we don't have people that can teach that, you know, we brought up and had that Go conference, our workshop, a couple months ago, and we're always looking for those sorts of things as well, because we are trying to make it so that you can find the talent you need to build your startup here in Alaska.
Well, all right, with that, I think we will wrap things up tonight, and let's please continue this conversation online. And thank you all for coming out tonight, having a discussion about this. I hope this is the first and not the last that we'll, you know, begin to have this community here in Alaska. Thank you.
Yeah.